would everyone like to call to order the SAP
Is this a copy for me?
review meeting? Anyway, let's do introductions.
Jennifer Johnston.
Pete Peterson, Tim Skin. Dick Train.
Elvin Jackson. And how about the folks in the audience? Please introduce yourselves since it's not that many of you.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk. Suzanne Fleet Green, Chief of Staff for Mayor Berkowitz.
Proctor, social work, practicum student.
Rosella Young, Assembly Council's Office.
John Marcinko, SAP Program Manager.
Oh, nice to meet you, Jeff.
It's a pleasure to meet all of you as well.
Robert Harris, CFO. Mike Abbott, City Manager.
Thank you. And Zig, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. Today is our February report day. So this is the things we're going to talk about today. We'll give you a little quick update about the activity of the project. We'll talk about blueprint closure, which is the next major thing sitting out there on the critical path before we can go forward with the configuration and implementation. We'll talk a little bit about project staffing, the contracting that's going on, your running costs, which is something we do every week. So you'll see that. We'll talk a little bit about project costs. And then we'll remind ourselves about the project's critical success factors that we started talking about in November. And then, of course, an outlook for the overall project. So the kinds of things that have been going on, probably the most important thing is that the project leadership team has concluded that really Blueprint's not going to finish by 2/29. I mean, that was the target. That's the actual date when the SAP contract ends, but it's probably not going to happen. The other thing is that there are some blueprint closure activities that need to take place. As I said, that's kind of on the critical path. We can't keep, SAP is not going to go forward unless they've got that. So that's going to involve a full week of the Functional Steering Committee doing a walkthrough. We'll talk about what that walkthrough is of three major process streams. The other thing that's important to note is that there's quite a bit of preparation work that needs to take place for that walkthrough in order to get to the final review and approval. And that's going to require most of the consultants working on that. Probably will take about 2 weeks. The SAP contract appears to be in its final stages of negotiations. So shaping up, apparently, I don't have any of the details, but the word I'm getting is shaping up quite well. The budget request that will come to you will be for six specific contractual line items, and we'll talk about who those are. One of them, of course, is SAP. I think it's important to note that the mayor did attend the PMO meeting this week. That was a good thing, and that the mayor and the directors meeting, was that today? Earlier today? Yeah. With the directors and mayor, we basically said, well, we're going to have just one name for this project, and so that's now going to be referred to as the SAP project as opposed to Synergy. So I changed all those titles. This is the status document, the summary page from the PMO meeting, from the Project Management Office meeting, basically saying here are the major teams and what their progress and what their status is. You've seen this. We've looked at it several times. This is now, as you can see, it's gone all the way to the week of February 19th, and the overall program status is red. Like I said, the team has concluded that they can't finish Blueprint by the target date. Okay? They are probably going to start a rolling 5 weeks as they go forward. So we might get a little confusing because as soon as they change the target date, everything will become green. Probably. Okay? So some comments. We've known and we've heard and we've discussed the fact that the finance team, the FILO team, continues to struggle with trying to complete the review and approval of all of its blueprint documents. The four outstanding modules areas that they're paying attention to right now are general ledger, controlling, CO, assets, and projects. The unfortunate part about that is that everything else is somehow tied and related to the general ledger. So as long as that is not complete, it doesn't matter if some of the other things get finished, they're still going to have to wait to get that finished in terms of going forward. Does that make sense? Okay. HCM, Human Capital Management, did have a hiccup. There was a vacation, and so some things slowed down, but they've caught back up again, so they're in good shape. They're actually going to finish within a day or two of 229. OCM is struggling. Organization Change Management is struggling because they don't have the resources. If you recall, we went through quite a few organizational, some staffing changes with regard to OCM, had different leaders, all kinds of issues, a lot of false starts over the last year. We now have another individual that's there. That individual seems to be doing quite well, but unfortunately doesn't have any support. And so he's doing a lot of work, and he basically is having trouble even thinking about finishing by 229. Technology, a couple of technology lines there. That's HEC, that's the database, that's getting everything outsourced and getting everything set up, getting the hardware, everything ready to go. That's in pretty good shape. Okay, they had a hiccup, but they've caught back up again. They will also probably have everything ready by 229 within a day or two.
Ready?
Yep.
Jennifer, would you? Yeah.
So, why is the general ledger, what happened? Why?
You mean the fact that back in February, everybody thought Philo was 80% complete and it was ready to go? Well, we talked earlier about the fact that if the longer you wait and the longer you sit around here waiting for the design to finish, the easier it is to start reopening Pandora's box.
Right.
And start going into what about, are you sure we didn't do that? And so a lot of that is happening, and that's what's caused a lot of this, point one. Point two, there's a resource issue. Okay, if you recall, last month, we talked about the fact that the actual consultant left. Okay.
We asked them to leave.
Well, they were gone. But the point is that there's nobody there now, and so it's being backfilled by people who were already here. Okay, and so that's caused a lot of that slowdown.
Anything else, Ms. Johnson? Okay. I'd like to take a moment for the record to recognize that the mayor is joining us. Please continue, Dick.
Continue.
Please.
This is a page right out of the Project Management Office status report. The only reason I'm putting it up here and highlighting for you a couple of the line items here, they identified the fact that they're not going to make it. I mean, that's what this is saying. They're not going to make it. We need to make an adjustment. We need to figure out what to do. And that's all that's basically saying. So in terms of project governance now, so we've talked about the status of the project, but now also we need to talk about project governance. And I think it's important that the very first line, the mayor has indicated he's our change champion. So, and as I said, he attended his PMO meeting this week. He also had a director's meeting this morning, early on. Those are exactly the kinds of things that the change champion should be doing. That's good news. That's good news. The executive team announced its intent to contract with John. So, and we have said several times now over the last few weeks that a lot of confusion in the project team about John and John's role, John Marcinko. That's been clarified. Okay? He reports to program sponsor, and he provides progress reporting and status reporting to the executive steering committee. Fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do need to update the project organization chart. Needs to be clear so we know exactly where John fits in that project organization chart. The role of the deputy program manager, at least what she used to be called, has become confusing. People are not too sure what she's supposed to be doing. Okay? But she is the main technology representative from the Muni on the project team. I think it's important that she remain there so that the team has Muni representation. So that way you've got Alden and another person. Does that make sense? So let's talk about blueprint closure. This is an activity that is in the ASAP standard methodology. That's what the SAP folks recommend. It's there, and it was in the master plan. The only problem, it was generic. Okay, it was generic, so there was no real indication of how much effort, how long is it going to take, what depth of detail, and so on. So this has all been brought up and has bubbled up to the surface over the last 4 weeks. So now all of a sudden everybody says, oh, here's what we've got to do. All right, here's what we've got to do. Probably the key thing was, all right, well, we need, because the functional steering committee is the reviewing and approving body. So the question was asked, how much detail you want to go into on this review and approval? Because you're talking about, just for discussion's sake, 1,000 documents, right? 1,000 documents, round numbers. So how much detail are you going to go into? To finally sign off and say, we are ready to go, we're ready to configure the system, we're ready to actually make things happen. So everybody said that the functional steering committee said, we want a deep dive. So it's okay, so then the SAP team, the leadership team said, okay, this is what you got to do. You're going to spend 1 whole week going through major summary level workflows, process workflows of the system. I'll talk to you about that in just a second. So that's what's going to happen. So it's called a walkthrough. All right? But in order to make that happen, the consultants have to prepare information. They have to prepare information because it's not a matter of going through 1,000 documents. Obviously, that's impossible. But so they have to then figure out how to summarize all of that according to those major work streams. I'm guessing this is going to be 2 weeks. Okay? But you can't do it completely until general ledger, controlling, assets, and project management are done. Okay? It's not intended to be something you read. It's intended for you to see that it's a long list. These are all the tasks that need to be done to prepare for the walkthrough. To prepare for the walkthrough. And these are the related documents that literally need to be prepared. The consultants are going to be doing that. All right? So just to show you, I mean, it's just not a simple task. These are the 3 process streams. So the consultants have to put together a hire to retire set of swim lanes and process models and descriptions and pros and cons and all that stuff that we saw on the prior page for hire to retire. And we have to do it for variations because you have employee hire to retire and you have contractor hire to retire. Okay? Same thing, plan to report. Variations such as budgets, expenditures, and so on. This is all that general ledger, CO, asset plan, and so forth. Okay? And then procure to pay. The famous, we got to start somewhere ordering things and we eventually pay for them. That's the flow. But we have variations. Purchase orders, contracts for goods and services, and you buy goods and you also buy services. They're different. Make sense? So just to give you an idea. But the focus here is not on the 1,000 documents. The focus is on module usage, integration of the modules, interfaces between the modules, and touch points with other systems. That's the whole focus of what these walkthroughs are all about. Because all the 1,000 documents, hopefully, by sometime in the future, will have been reviewed and approved individually, which is what we've been counting and paying attention to for the last, how long? 3 months? So this is the week. There's a schedule that's actually been laid out saying, here's how we're going to handle the walkthroughs. So we've talked a little bit about what's coming up, but I thought it would make some sense for you to kind of get a visual of all this. So up to here, this is what the PMO reported, and you just saw that. That's through week ending February 19th. So the question becomes, okay, how long is the team going to spend just finishing the review and approval of the 1,000 documents? All right? I think, as I said, the HCM team, Human Capital, pretty close to 229. So that's one more week. That's the week ending February 26th. Monday following is 229. So that's about where they'll end up. Right now, there's a lot of consternation, a lot of discussions between the consultants and the user team as to how long it's going to take for them to finish the GL, the CO, the asset management, and the projects. If you take the consultant view, it might take as much as 3 weeks, taking them out to the week ending March 11th. Okay? So, and then here are the others, and I think I mentioned to you, the organization change management team, they've already said that we're not going to finish until near the end of March. Again, one individual, no help. So what happens afterward? Well, when you finish, you can start, then the consultants can start working on the preparation work for closure. That's what the BCP means. Now, in theory, if it's only 2 weeks, you would say, well, yeah, HCM could start earlier, but right now, the plan and the approach is that all of the walkthroughs get done in 1 week. So if that's the case, it's looking like it would be somewhere around the end of March. Okay? If you can do it better, faster, absolutely. I mean, no question anybody's going to want that. However, I do want to remind you of one thing out here. I was listening to the Functional Steering Committee meeting last week. I was absolutely blown away when one of the comments that came up was, oh, what are we going to do for spring break? It was said, but I checked it out. That's when the schools here have spring break. And if they're all traveling with their kids, it's going to be hard to do some of this stuff. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about staffing.
Ms. Johnson, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As far as the, go back.
You want me to go back? Now you want me to play with technology here.
Oh, shucks. There we go. So as far as the blueprint closure preparation, each of those teams, it varies as far as the time it takes. I mean, would the
Presumably.
OCM team not take as long as, I mean, I would think Philo would be less complicated.
Well,
than
let me clarify something, if I may.
Yeah.
The OCM team is not involved with the walkthroughs. Okay? The OCM team is going to be involved with reviewing all of their stuff with the change leadership of this organization. Okay? Because they don't have functional documentation. They don't have all those 1,000 documents. None of that's OCM stuff. Okay? So when they're here, they're going to need to have a review and approval by change leadership of this organization.
That makes sense.
Does that help?
That makes sense. So really, it's just the HCM and the Philo, and
Right.
you can see where Philo, I wouldn't think Philo would take as long prepping as HCM, but.
Well, this is very inaccurate. I mean, this is trying to give us a picture because you got it, if this one takes 2 weeks, then everybody's doing this last week at the same time.
Right.
This is almost becomes, well, then how, because remember, there are 3 work streams.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be plan to report. This is going to be all the financial stuff. HCM is going to do theirs, but then you've got the HCM is going to do hire to retire. And then the question is, should they be helping with plan to report?
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Training.
I'll have a question, administration. When do we expect the contract with SAP to be finalized and then come to the assembly? How soon?
It'll come to you in a couple of pieces. The first of which will be on March 8th, and the second of which will be March 22nd.
Okay. Thank you.
Shall I continue?
If I may, we also have a work session tomorrow where we're going to get some information from the administration too, correct?
Including that, we'll be able to give you the details of those different pieces.
That's good. Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Sure. So, we're talking about John here, okay? John's on the East Coast. He won't be on site every week, okay? And I just want to make sure we all recognize that we've already had some issues with program managers having to travel from the East Coast. And we've also seen the result of that. So I'm just forewarning us that, John's going to be facing some travel challenges because of that thing. And we've already said that he's going to be reporting status to the Executive Steering Committee meeting. This consulting position is still open. Okay? Pretty important one. Right now, people are just backfilling to take care of that. The OCM team is still just one individual, and the entire data team has been deferred to realization. Because that had been earlier stated as being an open slot right now, but obviously if it's deferred, it's not an issue anymore. So we need to talk about staffing plans a little bit. I haven't seen them, don't know if they exist, but I presume that if SAP is projecting a certain amount of money for 59 weeks worth of work, I'm sure they've got some kind of staffing plan in there that says this is how many people and how many hours. That's got to be there, in other words, for them to generate any kind of dollars. Okay? I've been told that they also have included staffing for MOA. And we all know that we've talked about this quite a few times, about the fact that prior failures, one of the main reasons is the fact that we didn't get MOA staffing appropriately on the project. So SAP is well aware of that. And my understanding is they're saying, here's the numbers, here's what you got to have. I hope they also say, here's when you got to have them. Because you got to tell the people when. I hope. And then we all need to recognize that there really is no plan yet in detail that's in that master plan. It's not there for the next couple of months, but the planning has been set aside. People recognize the need to do that. But it looks like it may not happen until after blueprint closure, which could put it into April. So contracting, this is just a reminder. These are the 6 contract line items that you'll be hearing about and talking about, presumably. Certainly there'll be SAP, who is in essence presented as the prime contractor. Peloton, Alaska IT, John Marchenko, PBS, and Elite. These 2 are more admin kind of roles. We've talked about John. Alaska IT probably will continue to have that level of involvement. Okay, I don't know. The other 2 are the line items, the number of people that are currently on the contract that are charging time. They will change, there's no question about it. My bet would be that Peloton number will go down and the SAP number will go up. But I don't know. But I do think it's important to ask this question too, and that's who oversees these contracts? Who's the contract administrator? Because we're back to the comments that I've made month after month about, is MOA the system integrator? Who's reviewing and approving billings? Because these are all going to be time and materials contracts, I believe. Nobody has told me anything other than that. So they're going to continue to be time and material contracts. So this is just a kind of a recap of what prime means in terms of the conversations I've had. That SAP as the prime contractor will be the team, the group of people that will provide the leadership and the guidance and the oversight and the management of the people working on the project. Okay? But work product is going to be what they provide as opposed to deliverables. So they're very specific. I'm pretty sure they're pretty specific about that, because they don't want to have a contractual situation where they have to bill for that deliverable rather than for time and materials. And the reason for going time and materials, of course, is if you go fixed fee, they're going to want 25% more money. I mean, that's bottom line. So the staff augmentation contractors, because they're going to be looking over the staff folks, that's Peloton and Alaska IT. They're the bodies, okay, in addition to SAP bodies. But notice SAP will not have responsibility for the accuracy, quality, and completeness of their work because they're not subcontractors. As I understand it, they're separate and distinct contracts. And the reason they're separate and distinct contracts is because as soon as you make Peloton a subcontractor with SAP, SAP puts a premium on top. They charge you more. Okay? John's not a staff augmentation contractor, is not subject to SAP's management. He reports directly to the ESC and to Alden. So, a reminder, all contracts in essence therefore are time and materials contracts. Okay. This is the continuation of the weekly running cost. Not too many changes, as you can see. Pretty much the same in terms of weekly rate, weekly cost, and the number of contractors. The run rate continues to be over $300,000 a week. This past week was $315,000. Okay. Recognizing that we talked about this closure activity and the fact that work is now probably going beyond 229, and as soon as that happens, those are time material contracts. That run rate takes effect. And if you're adding an additional 3 to 4 weeks, do the math. Okay? So this past week, 1,300 hours. The average rate per hour is $240 an hour. Expenses are up to $37,000 a week. Practically everybody's traveling, except for the Alaska IT folks and the two admin folks. But almost every Peloton person and every SAP person is traveling. Okay? So there's kind of a round number of the delta. Project cost. You've seen this before. This is the information that I've been provided. It says this is the spending as of November the 30th, 12/31, January, through February 23rd. Okay? Now there's some interesting things in here. The one that pops out to me is we've been going through this blueprint review and approval process. That requires Muni staff. Okay? They've been working hard. I mean, they've been spending a lot of time on this. So in January, the cost to date for MOA resources was $9.255 million. February, cost to date's the same number. I find that odd. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know why that isn't rising. It should be rising. Okay? Now, the other thing I thought would make some sense to do is, okay, if we are sitting here thinking that this whole thing is going to run till 3/31, right? From today, that's 5 weeks, and if I use the 315, I get that number for contract services, including expenses. I don't know what the number is for Muni charges, because right there, it probably needs to catch up for January and February in this number. I don't have any information about these. These more likely are not going to see too much of an increase in the next 5 weeks. So there's your number, approximately, for the end of blueprint. Maybe low because it's missing this number. Okay? So we talked. How am I doing on time? Oh, I've got 15 minutes. So we talked from November on, we started talking about critical success factors for this project. Tried to keep it within reason, so I didn't load you down with 15 or 20 of them at once. The very first one was establish a change champion. Then we talked about the need for a systems integrator that we had some communication issues, really need to focus on, and that's a success factor. Great communications will help. That's tied very closely to change champion. Avoiding analysis paralysis, and you've heard me say, please avoid opening Pandora's box. Please don't go back in history and try to change your design. Okay, as much as possible, because you will end up spinning. Avoid repeating your history lessons. We've had those conversations. You mean those people are doing it again? Well, we should avoid that. We should learn from our lessons. We should have lessons. We should learn from those. No question about it, from what we did wrong, like MOA staff commitment. Don't cut your face to spite your face. There was a lot of conversation a couple months ago about how are we going to cut the SAP contract, how are we going to reduce scope, what can we drop out, all those kinds of things. Well, some of those things, you've got to be careful that you're not, spiting your own face. Now, the good news is I've got an update on all these. And then lastly, we talked last month about establish clear, concise project governance because of all the confusion that was going on between the various roles of leadership. So here's the update. The mayor has announced his commitment to be the SAP champion. That's fantastic. That's really good news. Oh, it's gone. Oh, there it is. I was going to look over and say, great. So, now, and I think, again, the organization is trying to do its best to control and keep costs down. It makes sense to say, I guess we're just going to have to go with the T&M contracts. Because of that issue, if you're going to go fixed fee, bang, 25% on top. Whatever the number is, it's going to be 20 to 25%. I've been there, it happens. So to do that, but by the same token, you still want to have responsibility as much as you possibly can, and you want to put it on a single vendor. Sounds to me like that's exactly where the Muni is going. That's good, okay? That they are dead prime. Now, how well the work products get defined, what the schedules are, and all that stuff is, I presume, going on as we speak. Okay? But those are good things. Those are good things. The OCM senior manager, I really think he needs help. But at least you've got one. And the senior manager is driving that change management thread. He is paying attention to it. He is going down that path to help drive change management for this project early, which is what needs to happen. You can't wait and assume that change management is all about training. And oh, by the way, we'll do that in September. No. People have got to be prepared early for all the changes that are happening. Okay, people have got to be prepared for the fact that depth ID goes away. Cost center, right? Cost center is now the depth ID. And I don't know how many years this unit has been using depth ID.
Many years, I have to say.
Many years. So that's an example of tell them early. Tell them early. You do not want to get into a training session and have somebody say, what happened to depth ID? You do not want that. We got to be careful in this whole situation with the whole business of how long it's taken to get these things reviewed and approved. Okay, those 1,000 documents, all the GL and all those things that are going on right now that we've talked about, because it opens you up to backseat driving without a doubt. And that is still happening today. Today, there are still, hey, what about, we need to do this. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, don't you guys have a list of all of them? Here's all the documents. Let's get on with it. Oh no, we need to add this and add this. That happened today. Okay? Now, part of it is because I don't think they understand what a blueprint is for. And they're going down the path of process design as opposed to configuration design of the software, which is what the blueprint's for. Many options, well, I've said this, the options for trying to reduce the scope and reduce the cost, most of those have been overcome. Most of those have been overcome. So, and we talked earlier about some of the options where, gee, let's get rid of those ECM, remember enterprise, content management. Well, that's back in. It's in a controlled way, but it's back in. Okay, same thing with business warehouse. That was considered as a drop until folks realized, wait a minute, I can't get reports unless I have that. So a lot of that stuff has been straightened out. And the second program manager's position has been partially clarified. The reason I say that is that, okay, I mean, if he reports to Alden, but he also reports status to the executive steering committee, how does that work? Okay, how does that work? So, at least in my mind, it's a question. One of the critical success factors was, gee, try to learn from the lessons of our past. Well, these are some of the things that we said were the events of the past that were an issue. Commitment, we talked about. Revisiting design, backseat drivers, opening Pandora's box, reaching for perfection, wanting everything. Now, I've heard some folks in our change leadership group that have said 80% is good enough, and I agree 100%. That is great, good thinking. Absolutely. You do not need to have everything. 80% is fine. Timely decisions. In the past, it's taken a long time to get some decisions made. Okay? A long time. And my favorite one, and you'll remember this one, is should we or should we not convert project to date data? That started a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago. Analysis paralysis, talked about that. Project staff turnover. We've had turnover, and we have experienced the net effect of that turnover, and it's never been good. It's never been good. We've had 4 OCM project managers. We are on our fourth program manager. Okay? We are on our 3rd program sponsor. You start thinking about it, and over the last 4.5 years, it's not good. Okay? But, it's not only at the leadership level, we're also talking about, wait a minute, how many different FERC consultants have we had? All right? How many different AP consultants have we had? How many GLCO consultants have we had? And it goes on. Confusing project governance, we've talked about that. You know how I feel about systems integrator for MOA. And, whatever we do, we've got to be careful not to cut corners. And again, the history there is that cutting corners was exactly what Black & Veatch did. It's exactly what Peloton did. They cut corners, reduce the design. Remember we've had the conversation where there was a blueprint document a year ago. And I forget how many pages said TBD, to be determined, on the page. Okay? So, we've learned a lot of these things. Now, we are going to have a full, correct, complete blueprint. Absolutely, we are. And SAP is going to be able to go forward. Okay, so a new critical success factor is team continuity. Team continuity. You want to preserve your corporate knowledge of the team. Because the more you have people leaving, then obviously you lose all that. And as soon as you lose that, you want to try to avoid the downtime that creates, the schedule delays, increasing cost. We saw that after the pause, right? Because we lost people. And we're still losing a few people. Some because we want them to go, but in some cases they're going because they're not happy. The consultants don't need. So we need to make sure that we connect to our requirements. We sure don't want to have a continual turnover of staff, and then the first thing they do is, well, I got to review the requirements. And then somebody says, well, we want to change the way we do that. I mean, we're back to opening Pandora's box. Okay, which is this point. So what kinds of things do we suggest that you might want to consider to try to keep folks happier? All right? And you've heard me say this before. Try to let those consultants go home on the weekends. try to let him go home on the weekends rather than keeping him here. Okay? The consultants are different from the North Slope contractors. Right? They're different. Okay? And a lot of those North Slope contractors have no family. A lot of them, pretty darn young folks right out of college type of thing, right? If they stay over the weekend, you ought to let them work. Right now, you're not letting them work. You're telling them 40 hours, but you got to stay the weekend. See you Monday. You go fishing. What? Maybe they don't fish. And you'll find that those folks actually really enjoy what they do. They enjoy working. Okay? So why not let them work? Yeah, you got to pay them. So in either case, I mean, either the travel expenses are going to go up a little bit, or your overtime is going to go up a little bit. It's going to have an impact on your budget. But in this grand scheme of things, I don't think it's that much money. In the grand scheme of things. Okay? Now, for the muni employees, you got to talk to them. We've talked about that's a critical success factor. You got to talk to them. Directors meeting, fantastic. Talk to them. And as I understand it, there were some folks that were saying, "Gee, come on out to our department meetings." Perfect. Talk to them. Let them know what's going on, and the team members are just as much as everybody else. Because sometimes everybody says, let's go talk to all the departments, and you forget to talk to the people in the project group. Okay? Talk to everybody. Rejuvenate. The change champion is the person who's going to rejuvenate this project. There are so many people right now that are basically saying, I'm sick and tired of hearing the name of that project. I'm sick and tired of working on this thing. There's a bunch of them out there. Well, rejuvenate it. This is why we're doing this. This is going to be good for us. We want you to participate. We appreciate your work. Provide advanced planning information for time commitments. Staffing plan. I don't know how many times I've used the term staffing plan. Need to have a staffing plan. Need to lay it out. Need to say, these 10 people, we need these 10 people in July for the first 3 weeks. So they can figure out, that's when I don't go on vacation or whatever. They need to know, and they want to know, and they'll appreciate it. Pay overtime when necessary. I mean, right now, I know the policy is, okay, we've got to keep costs down, don't pay overtime. Well, there are some folks there that, would really appreciate it because they are putting in maybe some extra time and they're not telling people. Recognize it. Pay them. And that doesn't mean pay everybody. It's when necessary. Celebrate victories. I hope that the Muni is prepared to have some kind of celebration whenever you finally say the blueprint is closed off, it's finished, it's done, we're ready to start realization. You really need to do something.
Pizza party to me.
So celebrate that victory. It doesn't take much. Pizza parties work great. Okay, minimize changes. This is critical success factor number 9. Do you see what the actual change was, the modification to this car? Do you have any idea how expensive it would be for you to fix that car if one of those doors breaks? Because there aren't too many of them out there. Minimize changes to core software. Okay. For your information, do you remember what RISIF means? Right? Workflow, reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, and forms. That's part of the 1,000 documents. All right? Well, right now, under the FILO category, there are 33 enhancements. I didn't show you the list of what they are. It gets to be pretty technical. There are 36 enhancements for HCM. Now, if those enhancements actually change core software, I would suggest to you that they need to be looked at. They need to be looked at. That's way too many changes to core software. Every change you make to that core software, when you get a new release, you got an issue. Okay? So they need to be looked at. The team should really operate under a zero tolerance policy. Some suggesting you need to have a policy out there that says, we're not going to do this unless there's some real good reason. Requiring executive approval for those changes to core software. Core software. Now, some of these may not make changes to core software. They just may be a bolt-on. Something
Excuse me one moment. You're
Sure.
doing a really, really great job. We have another meeting that's going to start here at 1:30, and I want you to finish, but I want to leave a little bit of time for questions.
Okay, I'm almost
It'll
finished.
be a few, but thank you.
Okay. So these are the reasons why, and I think the main thing is your upgrades are going to be a problem. Going to be a problem. Okay, so you've seen this before. This was taken from a white paper for time management, but it basically laid out the overall plan for the next 59 weeks. Okay? Given what we just talked about, since, see, this says realization starts 3/1. That was what has been discussed and what everybody thought for the last 3 or 4 months. Looks to me like we're now talking 4/1. So that just got moved. Question becomes, what happens downline? What happens downline? And I think the planners and all those folks need to be able to address that question. What happens downline? Is it now 58 weeks? Is it 60? Is it 59? Or is it change at all? Or, whatever the case may be. Okay? That's kind of the outlook. So I've said all this. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions from assembly members first? Okay, I have one quick question. To the administration, are there any markups in any other contracts?
We need a markup.
I mean, like, where I used to work, and I worked for the city of Acton, our contract, I didn't like it at all. But there was a fee, okay, and then there was like a 10% markup.
For example, with Peloton, we have the consultant hourly rate, and we've negotiated, and contract currently is 24% markup. On top of that, it's in 23.5%.
Okay.
So there is a markup on that. I'm sure there are markups built into SAP's numbers as well.
Okay, thank you. No questions from assembly members? Okay, Alden, this is your opportunity to make some comments. If you'd like.
Just a couple of comments here, going through, just more information, I don't want to necessarily reflect it here, but wherever Alaska IT was used, we have to put another invitation to bid for those particular things because they don't fall in the scope. So just consider that an Alaska resource. It might be a different company, it might be CTG or Alaska IT. You'll see something going on that. Alaska IT is our current vendor doing that work, but it is our goal to have local resources do the OCM and a few other pieces. It just may not be Alaska IT as far as that clarification. And the other point here is when you're talking about this blueprint closure, I want you all to look at that as a positive. Because for the first time, we're actually looking at the entire process and all of it before we get into configuration and testing and finding out that it's not something that is working right or didn't come out right. So while we may be delayed a little bit here and we may be spending some additional money on blueprinting to get that blueprint closure process done, I believe it will help us long term. And the last comment I'll make is pretty much every unit except for probably CO will be finished next Friday. So when we're saying that we're delayed from the 29th, most of them are 4 days. So I think we're relatively close to our target date. Yes, we had some issues with some consultants and a few other issues on GLCO, but all other modules should be done by next Friday, and I don't think 4 days is missing it too much. But when you saw the red there, we've stuck to the 29th. If we're not meeting the 29th, that's where we've done it. But as Zig mentioned, if we moved it out to the 31st, all of those would be green because we're very confident that we would meet all those particular deadlines. But the reason why it's red is because we've had a hard deadline on the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, not at this time. I get to come talk to y'all tomorrow.
Okay, great. Mr. Trainee?
Although he was talking about 66 enhancements. Who approves enhancements? And to the system? Is that you or who is it?
What I have seen is that as the consultants are working with the individual functions and work streams, those discussions happen and then they get incorporated into the blueprint. There has not been a formalized enhancement approval process.
Just seems like there should be at some level for enhancement to be done. It's got to come to your level or somebody's level to approve.
I will make the comment that many of these enhancements have been known for some time, and as we talk about the SAP contract, which will give you a lot of information tomorrow, those have all been factored into the pricing that we've been able to negotiate for the vast majority. I will say there are two that have been recently came up this week, and we'll be working through those, but the vast majority of those, from a costing and planning perspective, have been taken care of.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one other quick comment. I'm really happy that you changed the name of the project. The administration did from Synergy to SAP. Just makes sense, and I think it's really clear to the public what we're talking about as opposed to Synergy. So thank you for that change. No other comments? Meeting is adjourned.